Before the Hells Angels ever reached Europe, another skull patch was already in control of the streets. 60 years later, they are still here, still feared, yet almost entirely unknown to the public. The Blue Angels Motorcycle Club, Europe's oldest outlaw biker club, has been classified as a criminal organization by Belgian federal police. There are no Hells Angels chapters in Scotland because the Blue Angels have kept them out. They have survived gang wars, police raids, and international expansion. When one of their founders died, 400 bikers from across Europe attended his funeral. Yet most people outside biker culture have never even heard their name. In Belgium, authorities rank them alongside the Hells Angels as a major threat. Their history includes pipe bomb attacks, violent feuds, and a decades-long defense of their territory. For half a century, they have stopped American clubs from planting roots in Scotland. This investigation reveals the club that law enforcement constantly monitors but the public rarely sees. The most feared British biker gang you've never heard of. What is the Blue Angels MC? Origins and identity. The Blue Angels identify as a 1% club, a term that comes from a 1947 statement by the American Motorcyclist Association claiming that 99% of riders were law-abiding, leaving 1% to embrace the outlaw life. For the Blue Angels, that patch is more than an emblem. It is an identity and a rejection of mainstream rules. Their home base, the Glasgow Mother Chapter, is considered the oldest continuously active outlaw biker chapter in Europe. From there, the club expanded into England, Belgium, and Spain. Each chapter runs independently, but remains united by culture, bylaws, and the winged skull patch that marks their allegiance. These colors are not decoration. They are a declaration of territory. The club also uses support clubs to extend influence, sometimes indirectly into regions where they don't hold chapters. This keeps their presence strong without always being visible. While they don't court the same publicity as giants like the Hells Angels or Outlaws, law enforcement across Europe knows them well. In Belgium, federal police monitor them as an official organized criminal motorcycle gang, tracking members' movements, events, and suspected criminal links. Birth in Glasgow's gangland. The story begins in 1963 in Maryhill, a working-class Glasgow district long associated with razor gangs, neighborhood crews infamous for violence, racketeering, and knife fights. It was here that the Blue Angels formed, united by motorcycles and defiance of authority. They adopted the American outlaw model: formal patches, strict hierarchy, and absolute loyalty. At first, they were a small riding group, focused on bike runs, parties, and defending their turf. But Glasgow's crime-ridden environment quickly shaped them into more than a social club. By the late 1960s, police were linking them to assaults, intimidation, and street violence. As many razor gangs faded into history, the Blue Angels survived, building a strong identity rooted in Glasgow's hard-edged culture. By the late 1970s and 1980s, they began spreading beyond Scotland, expansion beyond Scotland. Their first major step was south into England, establishing chapters in several cities. They brought their Scottish reputation with them, tough, secretive, and fiercely protective of their patch. By the 1990s, their English chapters were fully integrated into the Blue Angels network, always loyal to Glasgow. But their real leap was Belgium. Strategically located between France, Germany, and the Netherlands, Belgium is a crossroads for trade and crime alike. The Blue Angels Belgian chapter quickly drew attention, and police placed them on national lists alongside the Hells Angels, Outlaws, and Bandidos. From there, the club also expanded into Spain, choosing coastal tourist regions with strong nightlife scenes. By the 2000s, they were no longer just a Scottish club. They were a European network. Law enforcement attention. Belgium's designation of the Blue Angels as a criminal motorcycle gang carries weight. Police monitor their movements, intercept communications, and can launch raids or close down clubhouses linked to criminal activity. Authorities see outlaw biker clubs as potential gateways into organized crime, particularly drug and weapons trafficking. Belgium's size and geography make biker violence harder to hide. Shootings, stabbings, and firebombings have erupted between rival gangs, fueling federal surveillance of all OMCGs. Even if not directly linked, the Blue Angels' name alone keeps them under constant scrutiny. Internal structure. Like other outlaw clubs, the Blue Angels follow a strict hierarchy: president, vice president, secretary, treasurer, and sergeant-at-arms. The mother chapter in Glasgow acts as the leadership hub. New recruits start as hang-arounds, then prospects, enduring a long testing period before earning the full patch. The process tests loyalty, secrecy, and commitment above all else. The winged skull patch is sacred. Losing it is the ultimate disgrace. Support clubs further strengthen their reach, serving as recruitment pools and buffers against police attention. Inside the Blue Angels, discipline is strict. Meetings are mandatory, rules are absolute, and violations bring harsh consequences. This internal order is what has kept them alive while rivals collapsed. Why Belgium watches them closely. Belgian police see the Blue Angels not just as bikers, but as players in organized crime networks. Their chapters sit near transport routes, ports, and nightlife districts, locations often tied to smuggling and drug distribution. Because Belgium is small, any biker feud has national impact. The Blue Angels' presence has therefore drawn consistent surveillance, joint international operations, and cooperation with Europol and Interpol. Every rally, every public run, every meeting is watched. In Belgium, the Blue Angels live under constant police pressure, a reality of their reputation as one of Europe's most enduring and least known outlaw motorcycle clubs. Scotland flashpoints in recent years. Despite expanding into Europe, Scotland remains the core of the Blue Angels' identity and the scene of their most publicized modern conflicts. One of the most significant involves tensions with the Mad Dogs MC, a rival club founded by a former Blue Angels member. Local media and court records have linked this rivalry to intimidation, assaults, and property damage, though not every allegation has resulted in conviction. A high-profile case emerged in 2023 when former member Dan Leondonder left to form the Mad Dogs MC. The split triggered a bitter feud. In June 2024, Leondonder was accused of planting a pipe bomb under the van of David Rowe, whose son was a Blue Angels member. The device was found before it detonated, but the incident forced a neighborhood evacuation and a large-scale police response. It highlighted the level of violence police believe can erupt from Scotland's biker wars. By November 2024, Leondonder was sentenced to 9 years in prison for the bombing and for weapons charges. Beyond feuds, police raids on Blue Angels-linked clubhouses in Scotland have resulted in the seizure of drugs, weapons, and cash. Even when prosecutions do not lead to major convictions, these raids show the constant friction between the club and law enforcement. 6 decades on, the Blue Angels remain deeply embedded in Scotland's criminal underworld, respected by allies, feared by rivals, and closely monitored by police. What courts prove and what they don't. With outlaw motorcycle clubs like the Blue Angels, there is often a gap between allegations and what can be proven in court. Police statements and media coverage frequently portray them as organized crime networks, but in court, prosecutors must meet a higher burden of proof. In Scotland, several cases involving alleged Blue Angels members have ended in acquittals or reduced charges due to insufficient evidence. Judges have sometimes ruled that while police suspicions were reasonable, the prosecution failed to prove club involvement beyond a reasonable doubt. Even in the Leander pipe bomb case, prosecutors secured a conviction against the individual, but could not prove the attack was sanctioned by the organization as a whole. This reflects a wider trend. In Belgium, too, while the Blue Angels appear on official police watch lists, direct convictions against the club as an entity are rare. Most prosecutions target individual members or associates, not the club leadership. This legal reality highlights why dismantling outlaw motorcycle clubs through prosecution alone is so difficult. Law enforcement may be convinced of their criminal role, but without courtroom evidence linking leaders to specific acts, the club continues to operate. Law enforcement tactics in the UK and EU. In the UK and across Europe, police use a layered strategy to disrupt outlaw motorcycle clubs. Unlike the US, which employs sweeping federal RICO laws, European authorities rely on a mix of legal, administrative, and preventative measures. In Scotland and England, this includes firearms licensing enforcement, targeted raids, and serious crime prevention orders that restrict suspects' movements and associations. Police also pressure licensing authorities to shut down clubhouses or revoke event permits if they can be tied to public disorder. Belgium takes an even harder line. The Blue Angels are formally classified as a criminal motorcycle gang. Authorities use nuisance laws to close clubhouses, seize property, and block public gatherings. Intelligence is shared with Europol so that members crossing borders can be flagged and monitored. Joint operations between UK, Belgian, and other European forces are now common, ranging from surveillance of club leaders to highly visible patrols at biker rallies. The objective is disruption, limiting recruitment, blocking revenue, and making it difficult for clubs to operate smoothly. Media versus reality. The Blue Angels' public reputation is shaped by two forces: tabloid headlines and the realities of court records. In the UK, newspapers often favor dramatic coverage. Images of leather jackets, burning vehicles, and crime scenes. These reports feed into the outlaw mystique but don't always match the evidence presented in court. While individual members have been convicted of serious crimes, the organization itself is rarely convicted as a whole. In Belgium, too, the Blue Angels are listed as a criminal threat by police, yet public trial records show few convictions directly against the club. In Scotland, years of surveillance and raids have produced plenty of charges but relatively few long-term sentences. This gap between perception and reality matters. For the public, it means much of what is known about the Blue Angels comes filtered through police and media narratives. For the club, it means carrying a reputation that attracts some recruits, but guarantees relentless law enforcement attention. Where they stand today. The Blue Angels MC remains active, with chapters in Scotland, England, Belgium, and Spain. Their Glasgow mother chapter is still the symbolic heart of the club, hosting runs and gatherings that draw members from across Europe. In Belgium, despite constant police pressure, they continue to appear at biker events, maintain clubhouses, and display their colors. Their size may not rival global names like the Hells Angels or Bandidos, but their endurance is remarkable. For over 60 years, the Blue Angels have survived turf wars, international expansion, and heavy surveillance. Their resilience comes from tight structure, loyalty, and a culture of secrecy. Law enforcement still considers them a major threat, but their ability to adapt has kept them alive. To outsiders, they remain an enigma, rarely making mainstream headlines unless linked to a crime, yet ever present within Europe's outlaw motorcycle scene. Born in the hard streets of Glasgow in 1963, the Blue Angels have built a legacy that blends crime, loyalty, and survival. As long as riders continue to embrace the outlaw 1% code, the winged skull of the Blue Angels will remain on Europe's roads.